This is the Cycling Over 60 podcast, episode 15, a major bike upgrade, and I'm your host, Tom Butler. Here I am again to talk about my journey to do the 206-mile Seattle to Portland ride, supported by the Cascade Bicycle Club. I now have only 15 days to train. I have done 64 rides since last November, but I wish I would have done more. Actually, I wish I knew in November what I know now. It would have changed my training a lot. I only have 7, maybe 8 more rides to do. The last few rides will be pretty light, so maybe 4 hard rides before the 15th. I want at least 4 rest days. One lingering concern has been whether or not I will trigger the bursitis in my left knee. So Jesse and I went for a 100-mile ride last Sunday to see what would happen. Here are the recordings we made during the ride.
So, Jesse, we're getting ready to do the longest ride you've ever done.
Longest ride I've ever done, yeah.
How far was the longest ride you've ever done before this?
40 miles. I might be taking kind of a large leap up to 100 miles.
So what are you feeling right now?
I'm concerned for you that you'll keep up.
That's a good concern, actually. I'm concerned about me keeping up.
I'm feeling really good. Everything is working well this morning. Properly stretched and everything. But 100 miles is a long ways, and I haven't done it yet, so we'll find out.
Yep, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to try to record you like halfway point or something and see how you're feeling and how I'm feeling, and then kind of bring people along for the ride a little bit.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So how far have we gone now, Tom?
41.82.
Lifetime record for me. Previous record was 40. Now a mile further.
Crushed it by a mile.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
How's your heat?
Good. How about you?
I'm pretty good. It's about 75 degrees outside right now.
Yeah.
And I think
Sunny.
staying properly hydrated has been really important, and we've been doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
What have you been putting in your water?
Ultimate. It's minerals.
Yeah.
Electrolytes.
And I'm feeling pretty good. My left knee, what episode was that I was talking about my knee issue? Jesse's Challenge, I think it was called, the episode. Anyway, that same knee issue has come and gone several times during this ride. I realized it's just inside my knee somewhere cramping. And so intentionally choosing to relax it and stretch it and staying properly hydrated with electrolytes and everything is keeping the cramping down. And right now it feels just as healthy as ever. So I'm really excited to know that it's manageable.
Yeah.
And it's like a discovery from this ride that it's just it's mostly, I'm sure there's some anatomical question in that knee, but it's manageable by staying properly hydrated. So
what's your confidence level as far as going 100 miles?
It's building. For the last few miles, we've been going uphill gently, 2% grade, I think you said.
Yes.
And so coming back, I'm going to be excited about going down that grade. We've also had a bit of a headwind, and so having the challenge on the first half of the ride. And how much do we have left till we're at our halfway mark? So like 9 miles or 8 miles or so.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're about 7 miles from the top of the trail, and then another 3 miles. So we're going to end right at about 50.
Yeah. So then we're going to be eating lunch.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's do another update at lunch.
Sounds good.
Just a few miles from here, but
all right.
I don't know if you can hear the ice cream truck.
Coming not yet, but it's coming this way.
We just had lunch, and we are at your house. We made it to the halfway mark. And how are you feeling physically at this point?
I feel good.
Yeah. You've already done this before. You went 60 miles on your 60th birthday, right? But
but I feel better than I did that ride or the last 100 mile I did. I feel better. My leg feels great, which is awesome.
Yeah. My leg's been feeling pretty good for the last 10 miles. The knee cramping that I was having earlier seems to have figured itself out. Also, my body went into its really efficient mode where I felt like I could ride pretty fast without even breathing very hard. So that was really fun to get into there. And I feel I called my daughters and they were like, "We're so proud of you."
That was awesome.
Yeah. So, but now there's 50 more miles to go.
Young daughters.
We'll see. Yeah. Imagine the cute voice of little girls. Yeah. All right. You ready to hit it?
Yep. Let's go.
Oh, you broke a spoke.
Yeah. That is, which is good because I'm going to go talk to the dealer about why I keep breaking spokes. This is the third time I broke spokes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're not on the STP with a broken spoke. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Well, at least you figured out what to do with it.
Yep.
I clipped it off. All right.
Let's go.
So tell me, Tom, this is mile 75?
74.59. So close enough to 75.
Okay. Tell me about your pain.
Well, I feel it in my back. I'm feeling it in my left shoulder a bit. My legs are tired.
How's your butt?
It's okay. I think that's the one thing that's okay.
Okay. I got pain in the palms of my hands, just pressing on those handles for so long. My butt's a bit sore. I think I'll be able to finish this ride. I'm not really looking forward to the idea of going 100 miles again the next day.
Yeah.
But this is also acclimating my butt, I guess. Yeah. And then, yeah, my legs are getting tired, pretty tired. And both of my knees now have some kind of complaining to do. But I'm not concerned that I'm damaging them, just that they are, we're like testing the tissue, and it'll take a little while to recover, and then it'll be stronger. That's what I'm feeling.
So how do you feel about it? We're almost to a point where you've gone twice as far as you've ever gone before.
That's true. Yeah. I guess I'm proud of myself. My wife said she was proud of me a little bit ago. And a friend of ours texted us. Texted us.
All right.
So this feels like an accomplishment. And I have the thoughts cross my mind like my car is still 20 miles from the finish line or 15 miles from the finish line. So getting close to like the place where I'd be like, I wonder if I should just stop and let Tom go the last 15 by himself. And I don't think I'm going to do that.
15 miles is so short, really.
Yeah.
It's so short. It's like an hour.
But I'm tired. But I do want to have dinner with you.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, food.
Yeah.
Let's drive ourselves toward the food.
Yeah.
All
right. Finishing up.
We'll give another update when we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless we crash.
I almost did crash. Let me talk about that for a second. We came up to an intersection, and there was a car who was thinking of turning, and I thought we were going to blow through it because the car was stopping, and Tom instead slowed down and waved. And just at that time, I was looking behind me to see if anybody was back there, and when I turned around, Tom was at a standstill. So I veered to the left and then hit my brakes so hard that I rode up on my front tire, and I realized that was happening, so I released my brakes, and then my back tire was already far to the left. And so I did like this hopping
like
tap dance thing.
Ninja like fall prevention move.
Oh, I like ninja better than tap dance.
Yeah. It was really impressive to watch.
But I didn't hit the pavement, and I didn't hurt anything. I did rip my pants a little bit. Oh, I did hit my crotch, so that hurt. But there's nothing permanent, so.
All right.
Now we'll give you an update later.
If we don't crash.
Okay. We did it. I am tired. How about you?
I'm really tired.
Yeah.
But it feels good.
Yeah.
102 miles. So we went a little bit over.
It's okay. We took the last 2 miles as a cool down, so that was good.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sore. Pretty worn out. My knees did stop hurting mostly, but I think it's because it's, of necrosis. So.
Yeah, so I didn't write it down, but it was like 7.5 hours on the bike.
That's a lot of time on the bike. I remember at one point, like the sun was getting ready to go down behind the hill, and I was like, I'm still riding the bike. Still.
But my knee feels great, that was the reason for me to do this, was to test to see if the strategies I have are working.
Yeah.
And they seem to be. So, I don't know.
We got stuff all over our arms. Flies.
Dead bugs.
Dead
gnats.
bugs. We got stuck to the sunscreen. All right. What are we going to eat?
Good job. Let's go get some Thai food.
Thai food, of course. All right.
That's it.
Over.
I woke up the next day after that pretty shot. I did go for a very short ride, just see what it would be like to get on the bike again, since we'll have to do that on the Sunday after the first 100 miles we do on the STP. And it was pretty rough. I'm very curious to see what it's going to be like that second day, especially like around 180 miles. I think it's going to get kind of tough. I would like to say thanks to Judson for sending me an email. It was really fun to hear his story. He shared how starting an exercise program helped him to quickly lose over 40 pounds, and his A1C dropped from 10 down to 7. He had to change his exercise program when COVID hit, so he started biking and steadily got to averaging 20 miles a day. I'm so glad to hear others who are on this journey with me. Judson rode his first STP last summer at 62 and will ride again this year. Thanks for the inspiration, Judson, and I hope to run into you at this year's STP. I'm going to be posting a picture of what I will be wearing the first day of the STP. The three of us will have matching jerseys so that we can hopefully have an easier time finding each other if we get separated. So if you're going to be doing the STP this year, keep an eye out for me. Garren got a new bike a few weeks ago. We talked about it a little in the Bike Fit episode posted on June 2nd, but it was such a major upgrade that I wanted him to come on and talk more about the experience of finding a new bike and what is so different about it. Here's our conversation. I'm joined by Garren Myler, who some of you know as my son-in-law, and one of the small group of riders that have joining me on the STP. Thanks for joining me, Garren.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
You recently got a new bike, and it was a significant change. So I wanted to talk about the implications of your new bike for the STP. And let's first start with some of your thoughts on biking. Before you moved to Seattle last year, were you planning on bike commuting?
I wasn't actually. It kind of was something that ended up falling into my lap. I didn't quite anticipate how far my commute was going to be. And so when I was planning on walking, it ended up being that it would have taken me significantly longer to walk. And so biking really made a lot more sense. And that was kind of what initially got me, on the two wheels.
And you picked up an electric bike, and I think that was specifically with commuting in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. The e-bike is a lot of help, especially in, rough weather, when it's rainy. It's good to have the battery to help you out a little bit. And, I got all the rain gear I need so I can go out there and commute to work and show up, dry as a bone still. But I enjoyed it. It was kind of like almost a challenge. I rode to work in 7 inches of snow. I rode to work in all sorts of rainstorms, and I always got there safe and dry.
And Seattle is not flat, so I think the e-bike helped a bit with some of the hills in Seattle.
Well, the biggest thing is just not being sweaty when you show up to work. It's not that these hills are unclimbable. It's just that by the time you get to work, you're not going to smell very good. And the e-bike helps with that a lot.
Gotcha. So then you started thinking about doing the STP, and I think that was my fault.
Yeah, for sure.
Then that changed your thoughts about biking.
Yeah, it certainly opened my eyes up to kind of a more long-term endurance style biking. I'd never done any sort of endurance sports, be that running, swimming, anything like that. And so the whole concept is kind of new to me. But I think with biking, what really appealed to me was the first time I went out riding, I left, from my house here in Seattle, and I was taking a bike trail south, and I just kind of started going, and I knew the bike trail went for a while, but I didn't quite know how far. And then I, was pedaling for probably 45 minutes or so, and I look up, and all of a sudden I'm in Auburn, which is a place that, takes a half an hour by car from our house. And it was like, wow, I just skipped all the traffic. It was a beautiful straight shot down the interurban, and it just amazed me how far I'd gone. And I said, well, this really keeps my attention. You go jogging, you go swimming, your scenery doesn't change very fast, and so it's really easy to get bored doing that. But when you're biking, you're moving fast enough that your scenery starts to change around you, and it seems like a way that I can get really long-term exercise without any risk of getting bored while I'm doing it.
And the bike you were on when you did that was something that we got for you. I think when you first started using that bike, weren't really thinking about you being a cyclist. I think it was just supporting what I was doing. So we didn't really go out looking for a bike for you on that first bike that you were on.
Right. And I didn't have any concept at all of, I mean, I knew that they were very generally, there were road bikes and mountain bikes, and commuter bikes. And I knew that there were all sorts of different kind of handlebars, but I had no idea what each one was for. And I didn't know anything about the nuances of what, defines each of those categories of bikes beyond, the basic appearance.
There were aspects of that bike, and it was a Trek Dual Sport 2, which is an entry-level bike, not an extremely cheap bike, but at the same time, an entry-level bike. And there was parts of that were really suitable for you for city riding. And maybe talk a bit about that.
So the Dual Sport 2 was really nice because it had a lockable front fork. So you could lock and unlock this front fork that would give you a little bit of shock absorption. And that was great for when you're riding around the city. Not to mention it had, I think, 40s on it for tires. So it was pretty forgiving. You could go down a pretty root-infested trail. You could hit some pretty good debris and it would eat it up just fine. But if you wanted to do, a weekend ride where you're looking for more performance, you can go ahead and lock that front fork up and then it wouldn't be taking any energy away from your ride. And that was a nice feature to have for someone living in the city for sure.
And then you had installed aero bars on that bike to give a different position to ride in. Mm-hmm. And I think that was effective. I think that it turned out to be something that when you would go on longer rides with that bike, which is a more upright bike and a straight bar bike, that those aero bars did give you a really useful option.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a lot to help improve the long-term comfort of that bike. So the flat bars, after a while, it can really put a lot of strain on your wrists, on your hands. Even some of my fingers would sometimes start tingling if I used them for too long. The aero bars really gave a relief to all of that. And it changed my posture to something that was a lot more aggressive, a lot more obviously aerodynamic, as is in the name. But it also gives your legs a really good angle on the pedals, besides just being upright otherwise. So overall, they're a great way to take a flat bar bike and make it into something that you can ride for 200 miles and still be comfortable.
At some point, we start talking about you getting a different bike. And I don't remember if that was a situation where we were just going to look at bikes or if you had made a determination that you wanted to get a new bike.
So the first signs of me thinking in my head, maybe I should get a new bike was some of the small but persistent problems that the entry-level bike had over time. So it started with this strange clicking in the rear hub that we couldn't quite figure out what it was. Turns out it was a rusted bearing, which was very premature for it to have rusted. It should not have been rusted that early. So that was likely, a manufacturing or tolerancing defect in the bike. And then also issues with shifting started to occur more and more. I don't remember exactly what the group set was on that bike, but again, entry-level group set. And so I would have trouble shifting. It would pop out of gear. And these problems sort of slowly compounded. Not to mention the fact that the bike had some more gravel-oriented tires on them. And I was pretty much exclusively riding on the road. So I was wearing a nice bald spot right in the middle of those tires. So I could see the tires degrading. I knew that some upgrades were going to need to be done in terms of that group set if this bike was going to support the kind of mileage that I was putting onto it on a weekly basis. And so I just kind of started in my head and on paper too, adding up, what is it going to cost for me to get new tires for this bike, to upgrade the group set to something that's robust enough for the kind of riding that I'm doing? And, what's it going to take to get some of these defects repaired, which, fortunately, the Trek dealership was able to get some of those things taken care of for us because it was a relatively new bike. But overall, the amount of money that I was going to have to put into the bike to make the bike into something that I would want to ride on an event like the STP would have cost a lot more than that bike itself was really worth. And so that's when you start to kind of revisit the idea of, okay, well, in the end, it's still going to be a flat bar bike. And in the end, it's still not going to be as aggressive or as light as I want it to be if I'm going to be doing this really seriously. So what would be the point of putting all that money into the bike if in the end it'll be better, but it's still not going to be exactly what it should be for what you're trying to use it for?
I think in my head, I was noticing that the way that you were approaching cycling was different than what I imagined it would be when you first got the Trek Dual Sport. You seemed to really enjoy it. We were going on longer rides. We went on the 60-mile ride on my birthday, and you're a strong cyclist. If you would have looked at cycling the way that you originally were when we first started talking about doing the STP, then that bike probably would have been fine. But it seemed like that you were interested enough in cycling and doing some longer rides and doing more events than just the STP. And so it was like, okay, now we need to start thinking differently and get Garren a bike that is like Garren's bike rather than this bike that he was using. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So you started evaluating bikes. Do you feel like you really knew what you were looking for from the beginning, or was there a lot of education that you needed before you could even figure out what you wanted?
So the very first thing I remember researching was what are the different kinds of bikes that are out there on the market and which one of those is going to apply most closely to the kind of riding that I'm hoping to do. So for me, I knew that I wanted to do events like the STP, but I knew I wanted to go on weekend rides that were long. I know I don't want to be doing like sprints or track biking or, cyclocross or anything like that. It's because I live in the city. I didn't think that I'd probably need a gravel bike for what I'm doing. So I went the road route. So I wanted a road endurance bike. And then from there, that was able to narrow in on sort of the general category I was looking at. And so those, of course, are going to be drop bar bikes. A lot of them are going to be carbon frames in the price range that I was looking, but that you can get them in aluminum as well. Just depends on which models you're looking at. Some of them will do either one. But I knew that I personally was going to want a carbon frame. I knew if I was going to put a fair chunk of money into a bike, I wanted it to be something that was going to last me, hopefully indefinitely. So I didn't want to buy a frame that I would later feel like I needed to upgrade. And we talked to people at the bike shops and the dealerships who said, you get the frame that you want and the frame that's going to last you forever, and everything else on the bike can just be switched out. You can switch out the wheels, you can switch out the seat, the bars, the group set, everything can be swapped out, but the frame isn't going anywhere. That's what the bike is, And so that's really what you're picking is your frame. And with that advice in mind, then it was like, okay, well, now I'm really going to go look at who's making frames that support the kind of thing I want to do. And then from there, I just kind of started with the big bike names, the ones you see on the street all the time, the ones that you'd recognize, Giant, Specialized. I looked at some of the more niche ones. I can't remember some of their names. Definitely looked at Canyon, and I just kind of shopped around on the internet for a while, figuring out what the equivalent bike would be, at each company, and then comparing those bikes and trying to find things that had similar features and price points. So it really a general shopping experience as a whole, but it also was a learning experience because I was coming at this not really knowing a lot about what defines these certain types of bikes.
You still had this, I would say, dual use for the bike. You wanted to be able to do longer rides, like the STP or some of the other Cascade rides, but then you also had this daily use of commuting as well.
Right. So that was my biggest criteria was I don't want a bike that I can use for the STP. I want a bike that I can use to get to work, and it will still perform very well on the STP. And that also adds an element of endurance and robustness that has to be in the design of the bike for it to handle daily riding and then weekend riding. It's both. It's every day pretty much it could be ridden. That was another factor, which is making sure I can have a bike. And that could have motivated beyond the frame. That's what motivated decisions concerning the group set, because you can select your bike frame and then you have different options within that. And so that's what started to motivate me towards moving into higher end group sets, making sure the gear shifters were going to be able to stand up to this type of usage.
Also, another criteria is that you didn't want to spend $15,000 on a bike. And so
right.
How to find something that was, that you were getting a lot of value for the money you were putting out.
Well, that in itself was a thing to learn, was what is an expensive bike? What is a cheap bike? Because really, I didn't have much of a frame of reference. As a kid, I had a Mongoose from Walmart, and so I don't know what constitutes a reasonable price for a bike with aesthetic features. And so that was something that I had to, through the shopping experience, learn for myself.
So you landed on a Specialized Roubaix.
Right.
And that is an endurance bike. I'm wondering what pushed you towards an endurance bike.
I just knew that endurance bikes were most likely to suit the type of riding that I was hoping to do. I think that the STP itself is certainly an endurance event, but even the very idea of commuting every day from the bike's perspective is an endurance event because the bike is getting used with a frequency that is above and beyond what a weekend rider would be using it for. So I ride 3.5 miles each way to work. So that's about 7 miles per day. So over the course of the week, that's 35 miles. So if you were someone that goes out on the weekends and rides your bike 35 miles, that would be the equivalent of what I'm doing just during the week. And then I'll go out and, maybe ride 60, ride a century like we did on the weekends as well. So it's a bike that's really getting put through its paces. And I wanted something I knew was going to be able to stand up to that kind of usage.
Yeah. And something that gets ridden, if it's raining a bit bit or it has rained, it's needs to not be too finicky. It can get dirty and it's not going to break down too much.
I don't know if you've seen some of the pictures of the Paris-Roubaix from this year, but it got pretty rainy during the race. And of course, a lot of them are riding Specialized Roubaix, but just caked in mud, couldn't hardly even read the brand on the bike. So certainly it does stand up to that abuse.
And it seemed like that was something that resonated with you when the dealers were talking about this is a bike that was designed for this kind of racing. They're hitting cobblestones and it takes more punishment.
Well, in particular, the cobblestone. I mean, the Paris-Roubaix is largely a cobblestone race. And I live here in Seattle on a cobblestone road.
Yeah.
And I've ridden down it before and it sucks. And so to even hear like, oh yeah, it's this cobblestone race in France. And to think, oh, I live on a cobblestone street. That seems pretty applicable.
When you started looking at different models, different manufacturers, then Specialized has a unique stem on the Roubaix. Can you talk a bit about what that stem is about and why you were attracted to that?
So the Roubaix has the future shock is what they call it. And to understand where this device comes from, you have to look back at the Paris-Roubaix itself. So the Paris-Roubaix for years was kind of an open competition. You could bring whatever bike you wanted. And then one year back when bike suspension was just kind of getting going, a team put together some bikes that had front forks on them and they just swept the floor with these bikes, right? Because the suspension really smoothed out the ride. It gave them the ability to go a lot faster through the rough sections. And so quickly after that, the Paris-Roubaix actually came back and it said administratively, we no longer allow any suspension on these bikes. They have to be solid frame bikes. And so from there, manufacturers really had to focus on making bikes that could stand up to abuse and the kind of vibration and shock that you're going to get from a solid frame bike on a cobblestone road. People oftentimes lose the Paris-Roubaix because of a mechanical failure. Their chain will jam or their derailleur will get stuck because the bikes are just getting so pummeled, right? And so when Specialized set out to create a bike for this environment, they realized that the suspension rule applies to the frame and the contact between the frame and the wheel, but it does not apply to the contact between the frame and the rider. And so the Specialized Roubaix has a little, probably 2-inch tall, about an inch of compression shock in the stem of the handlebar. So you can take the handlebars and you can push on them. You can feel it bounce back at you a little bit. It's just a little spring in there. And so what it does is it helps to isolate the rider from the bike without isolating the bike from the ground. And so this does two things. One, obviously increases the comfort of the rider quite a bit, but it does so. And the second thing it does is it does so without taking energy out of your frame's contact with the road. A normal shock would be absorbing that energy from the road as it compresses and dissipating it as heat. And that's going to take momentum out of your bike. Whereas a solid frame bike, and why most road bikes are solid frames, would be able to conserve all of its momentum without losing that energy to heat through the shock. But the Roubaix is able to keep your momentum between the frame and the ground while isolating you as the rider from the ground, which increases comfort. It allows you to pedal a lot smoother. And it's shown they've won 7 titles now at the Paris-Roubaix with this bike, because this is a really effective way to smooth out the ride, to increase rider durability and comfort without sacrificing the performance that you expect from a road bike of this caliber.
I know that you were really attracted to that, and that was a big, I think, determining factor to go with the Specialized. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And there really isn't anyone else that's doing that from the factory on any bikes. And the head shock in this is fully integrated into the stem and into the frame itself. And so it's very unique the way that they do it. And no one else is really doing that. So yeah, it really drove me towards that bike as the winner.
And then you had another decision to make, which was how much money to spend on the bike. And you ended up spending more than you initially had planned, I think. Help me know if this is true or not, but it seems like it was the Grupo that was the biggest factor in that upgrade.
Yeah, so when I went into it, I thought, I'm just going to get the base model of the Roubaix. The frames are all identical, but between the 3 tiers, there's the Roubaix with no suffix, and then there's the Roubaix Sport, and then there's the Roubaix Comp. And I knew immediately the Roubaix Comp is nothing that I need. That is what they run on the actual Paris-Roubaix, and it's Ultegra group set. It's an upgraded shock, and it's all sorts of other carbon wheels and features that really were just out of the realm of anything I would notice any significant difference in from myself. And so the Sport has the 105. That's the bike that I ended up getting. And it's the mid-tier model. And then the entry-level one has the Tiagra group set, and everything else is pretty bare bones, aluminum wheels, standard stuff across the board. So I was going in intending to just get the base model Roubaix because I didn't think that I needed really any bells and whistles at this point in my cycling career. And I figured that as I got better and better at cycling and I figured out more and more of what my preferences were, I could upgrade the parts as I go, and that wouldn't be a big deal. But we did hear from salespeople at different brands and at different shops across the board repeatedly. We heard people say, if you're commuting on the bike, do not get anything less than a 105 group set. We heard them say that at the track dealership. We heard them say that at Greg's and at Gerk's and everywhere. And I kind of took it with a grain of salt because I thought, these are salespeople. They're trying to get me to buy the higher end bike. But I even heard it from some people that weren't salespeople that the 105 is really as low as you want to go on the group set for something you're going to be putting that many miles on. And really, I think in the end, that's turned out to be the case because the Dual Sport 2 was having issues with its group set without being ridden too much. And I haven't had any problems with the 105 group set so far. And so that decision in itself was kind of a tough one to make, but I think I landed on the right thing.
Yeah, I was worried about you kind of repeating a problem that you had by getting a group set that wasn't as robust as what you need for the kind of riding that you're doing. I could have seen you, 6 months down the road, wishing that you had invested a little more money in it. And again, you're using it daily. So, I did feel like it was worth the extra money for what you're doing. And I also think, I don't know that kind of what your riding is going to be like in the future. I could see you getting involved in doing some rides with some pretty serious cyclists. I could see you maybe eventually doing the STP in one day. And I just think that 105 group set is more of a match for kind of where you're going with your cycling.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I like the way that the woman that helped us at the track dealership put it very well. She said, when you get a Tiagra group set, it will work fine for now, but there will come a time when you're going to want to upgrade. But a group set is not a particularly exciting thing to upgrade. It means marginal improvement. It would mean that you would probably be fixing a problem that you had rather than just outright improving the bike from where it's at. And so when you go for a 105 group set, that's going to last you for a really long time. I doubt that there's really going to come a time where I'm going to be itching for a better group set unless this one totally wears out. But that does free you up to do like, hey, let's get some carbon wheels on this thing, or hey, let's get a new saddle for this thing. And those are the really fun upgrades because it makes such a noticeable difference in your ride. Whereas upgrading the group set, it's splitting hairs. And I really like that. That was a good selling point for me, was to say that this group set is going to mean that you get to do fun upgrades sooner.
Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to Christina Gray, by the way, at Trek in Issaquah. She spent a lot of time talking to us. You didn't end up buying a Trek, but at the same time, she was extremely helpful.
Absolutely.
And not high pressure. She just was really helpful.
Yeah.
So then there was another decision that you had to make. You were looking at being kind of in between sizes of bikes.
Right.
And I don't remember the sizes now.
So I am about 6 feet tall, and that puts me right on the edge between a 56 and a 58 for frame size. So I went with the 56. My primary motivation for that was I asked the salesman, is it more aggressive to size down or to size up? Because when thinking about the longevity of a bike I'm going to use for the rest of my life, I want to think about, is this something that I'm going to, from a performance standpoint, is this a bike that I'm going to outpace in my cycling career? And so I'd rather get a bike that's more aggressive that we could detune later if I ever wanted to take it down a notch for some reason, than get a bike that was not aggressive enough and feel like I wasn't getting the performance out of it that I needed. So I went with the 56. But that being said, if you are at a height where you're kind of on the cusp of two sizes, a good thing to check out might just be how your wingspan compares to your height. I actually have a pretty small wingspan for my height. I probably have the wingspan of someone who's maybe 5'10". And so that would put me squarely on a 56. And I have felt very good on a 56. And when I got fitted, one thing he pointed out was that the Specialized bikes come with a 110 millimeter stem on them, which is about as big as you're going to want to go. And so when you get these bikes, they're actually going to feel bigger than they need to be because of this really long stem they put on there. And I went down to 100, and I think that the bike fitter was saying I even could have gone down to a 90 millimeter and probably have felt just as good. And so that the stem size in itself is really a lot of variability. And so if you're on the cusp of two sizes, you're probably not going to make too bad of a decision. You can't go too wrong because you can always make up for it in the stem. But one thing the bike fitter said is it's a lot easier to make a small bike bigger than it is to make a big bike smaller.
I think there was some question in your mind when you walked out with that bike, but it just seems like there's been a lot of things that kind of validated that concept of if you're a little bit big for a bike, it's easier to adjust the bike to fit you than if you're a little bit small for a bike.
Right.
That's seemed to hold true.
Yeah, right when I walked out, I thought, man, I really didn't research this frame size. I just kind of hopped on it and rode it and was like, yeah, that feels great. And I didn't do any homework about it. And so I kind of panicked a little bit because that is the one thing you can't change once you get your bike, is if you got the wrong frame size, that's the wrong frame size. But sizing down has been absolutely perfect for me.
And I want to promote going out and getting a bike fitting. I mean, all three of us had bike fittings. You can listen to that episode just a couple episodes ago, maybe 3 episodes ago. I would really promote going in and getting a bike fitting. But when you walked out of that bike fit, I think now that bike fits you really well now. Do you feel like that's the case?
No, that's absolutely true. I think the bike is the perfect size for me, and it was really easy to fit to me, and it's been perfect.
Now you have a very different bike than the dual sport that you were on. How do you feel about this bike as an STP bike?
So the absolute biggest difference in the two bikes is for sure the handlebars. I mean, a flat bar versus a drop bar is a huge difference. Unfortunately, the aero bars don't fit on the road bike configuration that I have. It just would get really clunky if you tried to put them on. We actually talked to the bike fitter about it, and he just essentially said it's not really worth it unless you get some really funky looking ones. But overall, having the angle of your wrist changed from this horizontal angle to your hands then being vertical is so much more natural, and it reduces fatigue all the way from your hand to the wrist all up to your shoulder. It's going to make you feel a lot better, and even into your back a little bit. And once I got fitted, making sure that the angle of my arms to my torso was proper, and being on a road bike and being sat down a lot more, it can put more strain into your trapezius muscles and just really strain your back a lot more. And so it's been an adjustment to figure out how you get comfortable on a bike like this over a long ride. But by and large, it's being able to just rotate my hands 90 degrees from the angle that they're on a flat bar bike makes the world of difference.
And you were putting aero bars on a very different bike geometry. And this one, it seems like you are extended forward quite a bit without the aero bars. That's a big difference. And then it was interesting. Ross is a competitive cyclist, the bike fitter that you used. His thing was, if you want more of an aerodynamic position, just move your hands in on the bar, bend your elbows, and bring your chest down towards the bike more. And that's a better way to get an aero position than having aero bars, unless you're getting more of a time trial bike.
Right. I've definitely done that position before, with your hands really close to the center, your elbows tucked in, and you sit down with your chest near the frame. And it is not something that I can personally sustain for very long. I think if you were, doing a sprint kind of thing, that would be helpful. But for the kind of riding I'm doing, it's all about comfort. And that is certainly not a comfortable riding position.
Yeah. So that might be something that you'll have to play around with. You're not upright. I have a flat bar bike that's similar frame geometry to the dual sport, the FX3 that I have, and I feel like I have to have that because I'll get fatigue in my neck. How significant, how dramatic has it been, the shift in the frame geometry and your position on the bike?
I mean, it's night and day. Like you said earlier, I have this e-bike that I ride sometimes, and it's a flat bar upright commuter style bike. And I got on it just the other day to head down to the post office. And as soon as I got on it, it almost took me a second to remember how to ride it, because it's so different. I think one of the big things is having the angle between your waist and your thigh be more aggressive on the road bike really gives you this ability to crank the pedals a lot more effectively than you can in an upright position. And that's been a really key thing for me, especially on like things like hill climbs, being able to drop your hands down to those lower bars and really tuck yourself in. And it gives you that good leverage with your knees and your thighs to make those sharp angles to really push at those pedals.
You got the 105 group set. Part of that is that the gearing has to be way different. I didn't really compare the two between the dual sport, but I'm thinking the gearing is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
What have you noticed about that?
I think that it does have a lot faster of a high-end gear. When I'm going down a hill descent, I can always find a gear that I can put power into the wheels, no matter how fast. I mean, I can be going 35, maybe even 40 down a hill, and I can feel like, okay, you can still put some power into these pedals. You're not just pedaling at nothing.
Talked about the Future Shock. Do you feel like you've acclimated to that? Do you feel like now you'd have a hard time riding something that doesn't have that? Where are you as far as the Future Shock?
The beauty of it is that you don't notice it because it's so smooth. I mean, you notice that the bike rides really well, but you don't get on it and think, oh, no, why are these handlebars mushy? Which I think is what a lot of purists would say about riding the Roubaix in a non-Roubaix-esque setting, would be that it's going to be gummy when you're trying to go up a hill and you're yanking on the bars. You're going to feel it. It's going to be mushy. It's not going to be good. You're going to lose some power there, But I think that the key is that you absolutely don't realize that the shock is there. You notice that the bike is buttery smooth, but you don't think why. You're not thinking, oh, it's because my handlebars are mushy. You don't notice your handlebars at all. So it's been pretty excellent. So the bike comes with the medium spring in the head shock. There's a soft, a medium, and a hard spring. And my plan currently is to switch out the spring actually for the hard one prior to the STP. And I think I probably will ride the hard spring just in general. The medium spring I've noticed compresses probably around 50% or greater of its compression just from my weight being on the handlebars in my natural riding position. And that to me, it seems kind of like a waste. I don't need to be in the head shock just sitting there. I'm really only utilizing half of its travel distance when I go over a bump, and it just is going to bottom out, anytime I hit anything. So I would like to switch that out for the hard size. I think that probably has more to do with your particular riding geometry and how much of your weight is distributed to your hands, and also just your overall weight yourself. I'm a pretty top heavy guy. So for me, it's going to compress that spring just from sitting there more than, maybe someone who wasn't quite so top heavy.
Well, you are the resident engineer of the Cycling Over 60 podcast.
Okay.
And so, so people know you do have a degree in mechanical engineering. You work as an engineer. I'd like to maybe get a little bit more nerdy around some of the things.
Sure.
And start with your bike position from a resistance perspective. Do you have some thoughts about what improvement you've made in this bike switch from air resistance?
So as a basic principle, air resistance is a function of your velocity and your cross-sectional area. So given a certain velocity on your bike, it's going to all have to do with your cross-sectional area when you're looking at it, from the front. So basically, if you were to take a silhouette of the biker from the front view, the size of that silhouette is what determines how much air resistance they're going to encounter. And so in general, if you sit up more and you have your full torso, perpendicular to the direction of travel, that's going to create a large cross-sectional area. Whereas when you're tucked down into a little ball, you're just going to be a lot more streamlined. And so on a road bike, that is the position that you're going to be tending towards. And that just having drop bars in general is going to spread you out a little more. Your hands are going to be a little more Supermaned in front of you. And in general, that's going to increase your aerodynamics. The frame of the bike itself obviously plays a role. Actually, cylinders and circular things in general are some of the least aerodynamic shapes out there. They make really big drag eddies behind them. That's why you'll see a lot of time trial bikes and track bikes. They'll have the airfoil-esque shapes on their frame, and that's to try to be as streamlined as possible. So if you just have a aluminum tube, for example, that's welded together, that's not going to be a very aerodynamic frame. That being said, when you look at the cross section of the bike from the front, you as the rider are the vast majority of that cross section, and so when you start looking at the shape of your frame, you're really splitting hairs. So if you put one of those time trial bikes into a wind tunnel and you compared it to a vintage Puget bike made out of aluminum tube, then yes, it's going to be much better on this new airfoil bike. But when you put a rider on top of there, and you're talking about a couple percentage points, right? So not as big of a deal as it really you think it might be.
In effect, if you're getting less drag, that less drag is going to translate to, for most humans, more speed.
I think the best way to look at the question of drag in your bike is to think about where the energy is coming from in your bike and where the energy is going in your bike. So when you pedal those pedals, you're putting energy that you got from all the apples you ate, and you're putting them into your bike, putting the energy into your bike. But your bike is fighting against you in some ways. So if you're going up a hill, you're losing gravitational energy. If the wind is hitting you, then that wind resistance is taking energy out of your system, and any friction in your hubs or between you and the road or anything is going to cause you to lose energy as well. And so when you get more aerodynamic, you're going to notice that for the amount of energy that you put in, less energy is being lost. And what that feels like as a rider, and what I've experienced on my bike, is it feels like putting in the same amount of effort into the pedals and just generally moving faster. And that comes from having nicer hubs, a better group set, maybe more properly sized tires for the activity that I'm doing, going to a 32 instead of a 40 like I did. You're going to find that there's just less things that are trying to slow you down, less wind resistance from the change position, less friction in your hubs. And altogether, you're going to be putting in the same amount of effort in your pedals as you were before, but you're going to notice that you're going significantly faster for that same amount of effort. That being said, as soon as you start climbing a hill, your overcoming of gravitational energy going up that hill is going to far outweigh the minuscule amounts of energy that are being taken away in wind resistance, especially considering you're not going to be going very fast. You're not going to be flying up a hill. So drag is proportional to your velocity squared. So you're going to experience a lot of drag from the wind at high speeds versus almost none at low speeds. And so when you're going up a hill, the drag energy is not very important, and the energy in your hubs isn't any different than if you were flat. So the majority of your energy is just going towards getting up the hill, fighting your difference in potential energy. And so that being said, when you get a nice bike, don't be shocked or don't be disappointed if it doesn't feel that much different going up a hill. You're still putting in a lot of work because you're moving your whole body mass up the hill, and that's is what it is.
If we were going to sum up this bike change for you, it feels like it has been dramatic.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And part of that is that you just simply have a bike now that I think matches far more the type of cycling that you will do.
Definitely. And I think it also aligns better with what my goals are in the future as well. And looking down the road, this is a bike that's going to serve me for many years and something I'm not going to get tired of.
Yeah. And it was hard to know that you were really new to cycling. You're still fairly new to cycling. I think you're, got 1,000% more knowledge about cycling that you had a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It was hard to know when you first started cycling, but now you've been in it long enough to notice like a lot of things about this bike. We have not ridden since you've gotten this bike. We've not ridden together.
That is true. Yeah.
That's a drag, but we'll definitely be riding together soon.
Oh, yeah.
We need to try to meet up here and ride, but we will be doing 206 miles on the STP soon together.
Definitely.
So it'd be kind of fun to watch more as you get more familiar with the bike, kind of how you feel about it.
Yeah.
When you ride with me, there is a real limiter to what you're doing, which is me. Do you have some plans of maybe getting involved with some people and trying to push it harder than in a group than what you're able to push when you're riding with me?
So I think in the meantime, I'm just trying to do a couple more organized rides with friends of mine who are looking to kind of match a similar pace that I'd be looking for. So that means I'm trying to do the RSVP in August, which is a similar mileage to the STP, probably again over the 2 days. But I've already started thinking ahead to next year and think about what it would take for me to be able to do the STP in the 1 day time as a challenge to myself. So definitely, I am looking to surround myself with some people that are going to match my pace. I don't know if that's going to look like a riding team if I can find one, or just a casual group that I could join. But I'm definitely open to that, and I'm looking for that kind of thing.
Do you have some people that are joining you on the RSVP?
Tentatively, nothing confirmed yet, but it's kind of a roving plan still.
Well, thanks, Garren, for again jumping on and talking about this and getting a little bit technical there. I'd like to hear more about that and find different ways to look at cycling from a real technical perspective. But thanks for jumping on and having this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Talk later.
Yep.
Bye now.
Bye.
I know that the bike I have is best for me right now, but I can't help being drawn to an endurance bike based on Garren's experience. I know the FX3 that I ride is not the most efficient bike, but it is best for me right now. It has been so enjoyable to watch Garren discover cycling and really get into it, and to see that he has a machine that really feels great to him now and is the best for him. I will be looking forward to seeing how far he goes with cycling. I put a couple of links in the show notes. One is a look at how manufacturers have tried to build Paris-Roubaix bikes, and the other is the history of the Specialized Roubaix that Garren is now riding. As I said earlier, I will put a picture of me up on the Cycling Over 60 Instagram with the jersey that I will be wearing on the first day of the STP. If you see me, please give me a shout. Also, please reach out like Justin did and share your experience with me. My email is in the show notes. Whether you're winding up your training for the STP or another ride, or just discovering new trails, I hope all your cycling adventures are awesome. I hope that the wildfire smoke clears so that people in those areas aren't impacted by it. Have fun with your cycling, pals. And remember, age is just a gear change.